So good morning to everyone who's joining us for our second Nation Builder Thought Leadership webinar. We're really looking forward to this one. We have Prof. Jansen with us in our Stellenbosch office. We kickstarted this last month with Karen Kruger speaking on social entrepreneurship, as well as its role in advancing our nation. So we're really looking forward to untackling education and its role as well in furthering our nation. So we had a look at topics like fees must fall and a number of things that have been happening in our education space, children falling in pit toilets, it's hair sagas. It's really been quite interesting over the past couple of years. So we're really looking forward at how we can just hear some pearls of wisdom from Prof. Jansen on what his take is on contextualizing us on where we are as a nation at the moment. So at the end, I'll give an opportunity for us to type through our questions. I'll then relay them to Prof and he'll then answer them. So make sure that you write through your questions and we'll make sure that Prof sees it and is able to address it as well. And so just to introduce Prof, he's currently a professor of education at the University of Stellenbosch, and he actually spent 7 years as Vice Chancellor and Rector at the University of the Free State, which is probably where a lot of us know him from. He is also currently the president of South Africa's Institute of Race Relations and the Academy of Science of South Africa. And in his book, quite interestingly, on how to fix up South Africa's schools, lessons from schools at work, he actually captured what happens inside disadvantaged schools that are actually producing really great results within physical science as well as in mathematics. And this book is actually was distributed to every single high school in the country. So we're really speaking to someone who's very knowledgeable about education in the space, and we're really eager to tap into his knowledge. So Prof. Jansen, thank you so much for gracing us at Nation Builder, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Shangiwe, and also colleagues and those whom I cannot see. It is an enormous privilege to be with you this morning. And as Shangiwe said, I'm a distinguished professor at Stellenbosch, or as my letter of appointment says, never write in Afrikaans. If, in English, if you're an Afrikaans speaker, it says I am an extinguished professor. So I feel rather burnt out this morning, but I'm delighted to be here. So I think that education is important to me and important in this country, because in the long struggle for liberation, this is the only country in the world that I know of in which young people put their lives on the line for education, not for welfare, not for health, not for housing, but for education. And that is the story of 1976, of course, and before that. And so we have an incredible obligation to make sure that education works. I work 18 hours a day in schools and universities around this country with the sole purpose of making sure that education works. And I tell you why. I don't know from the literature of any other way in which you can lift people out of poverty other than education. I really don't know. I think as they were called at the time, the Afrikaners understood that really well after the Boer War. They made massive investments in Afrikaans as a language and in education on a race, as they called it. And for a very simple reason, that they knew this could lift their people, as they called them that time, out of poverty. And so on. So I come into this profession as a high school teacher, first of all, in Friedenberg and District 6, and then as a university leader around the country, with that simple equation in my mind that if you get education right, you can actually lift young people out of poverty. Now, let me just say this from the economics of education point of view. South Africa has, most people don't know this, the highest rates of return, of individual rates of return to education in the world. In other words, if you invest in education from the point of view of the individual, the rates of return are extremely high. Okay, in other words, families benefit enormously. Secondly, the social rates of return are also very high. In other words, the society also benefits. So if we're going to get education right, I mean, the spin-offs for both families and for the nation are enormous. And people don't understand, therefore, why it is that you have this incredible inequality, both in terms of infrastructure, as well as in terms of learning outcomes, that is achievement scores, etc. So this is the only country in the world that I know of that you can, in every province, within 30 minutes, you can drive from some of the best resource schools in the world, like Michael House or Sachs and so on. And within 30 minutes, you can be in a school without toilets for children. Why that is sustained, God alone knows. But I am convinced that I just don't think the politicians care now about the education of the poor. They don't, because if they did, that would be fixed. Okay. But secondly, also in terms of learning outcomes, you might have seen the polls data that came out. These are comparative assessments of reading literacy, that up to 8 out of 10 kids in South Africa cannot read for understanding. In other words, you put a textbook in front of them and they just see words. Now, this is implications not only for languages, it's implications for science, it's implications for history, because you can't read what's in front of you, you can't understand. So despite the fact that we spend more money than any other country on the continent, even more than Botswana, in terms of the percentage of GDP, but also as percentage of the national budget, why is it we still get these horrible results? And that, of course, is something we need to talk about. So I give that little bit of a background to talk about why the focus on fees must fall is a mistake, okay? And I'll tell you why in a minute. So let's just talk about fees must fall for a moment. I think it is correct that if you are a poor South African and you cannot afford to study for a degree and you're talented, the state has an obligation to provide you with access to education. About that, I am clear. And by the way, that is completely possible within the fiscus. It's possible. You can spend the numbers anyway. If you take poor kids from Khayelitsha, from Annenberg, from just around here, Kaimandi, and they have the marks, you can fund them for higher education. That's not the problem. The problem is when the demand comes from certain quarters in the student body, free higher education across the board. That, first of all, isn't possible. We don't have that money. But secondly, it would be a disaster if one of the goals is to bridge or overcome inequality. Because what you're then doing is you're giving middle class and wealthy kids free higher education, and they simply benefit more, than from kids at the bottom. So it's not possible, as I said, from a budgetary point of view, but it's also not desirable from an inequality, and poverty point of view, etc. And that we must resist, etc. Secondly, we mustn't forget that the participation rate of students in South Africa in higher education is 19%. For Black Africans, it's 16%. Okay. What that means is when you're putting that amount of money into higher education, a very small percentage of your population benefits. And where we should really be putting the money is in the preschool years. Now, let me just be clear with you. Most research in education, educational research, of course, is not, chemistry or physics research, okay? Educational research is essentially social research, and therefore, almost every study on anything is equivocal. In other words, you can debate it back and forth. So, for example, the relationship between class size and student achievement. I can pull up a whole lot of research that shows you if you reduce class size, you can increase achievement. And I can show you a lot of other research that shows you it doesn't matter actually what the class size is, especially in high school, you'll get high achievement anyway. So that's educational research. Some people say this, others say that. There's one area in which the educational research is unequivocal, and that is in terms of investments in preschool education. There, two things are clear. So let me first give you the bad news and then the worst news. Okay? The bad news is that if you invest in a quality preschool education for child A, and in a poor quality, essentially back of the house, go taking care of the kid, which many of our mothers and grandmothers do. And so there isn't really a quality preschool education. That the gap by the time they get to grade 1 is huge in terms of preparation for schooling between these two children. That's the bad news. The worst news is the gap never closes. So over the next 12 years of schooling, that gap continues to increase. This is wrong, obviously, and must be fixed. So why, ask the question, why is it that we make investments in education where the noise is rather than where the need is. Okay. Now, unfortunately, 3-year-olds don't scale the gates of Parliament, demanding, education, and politicians, understandably, I suppose, go to where the noise is. And I think that is a huge mistake, because if you really wanted to rebuild the education system, you build it from the base, okay, which is preschool. You strengthen the foundation years, those first 3, 4, 5 years of primary school, okay, and you make sure that those kids stay in school, because the dropout rates, as you know, rise precipitously after grade 10. So that's what you need to do. But you cannot build a nation when 16% of your Black African students are in university. And then, of course, what you also find is that more than half of those kids will drop out in the first year, and less than 50% of them will get the first degree in 5 years or less. So, I mean, what are we building here? Now, this creates other kinds of social pressure. So, for example, one of the demands of students, which in my view is an understandable demand, is we need more Black and women professors. Absolutely correct. But if the pipeline runs narrowly, where are you going to get the Black women and the Black and women professors? It's not going to happen. Okay. So now there's the pressure again here from the top. Where are the Black professors? Which is a good question. But your pipeline is so narrow. So for me, the way you're going to correct a whole lot of other things is by broadening the pipeline. Think of investment companies. Look at you guys around the table right here. I love you all very much. I really do. Okay, but I don't see more than 2 or 3 Black people around this table in a country with 80%. Now, it's not your problem. The problem is we haven't fixed, okay, the foundations that enabled us to have another 100 QS, in the Stellenbosch area and so on and so forth. So for us to correct all of these things, we're going to have to deal with the inflation. Of course, the politicians don't get that, okay? And so they will put their kids in private and quasi-private public schools, but they really don't care about the education of the poor. And that is why such is so dangerous for the education of poor Black kids, because they don't disrupt Saxon bishops and Bloemhof and Polroos. What they disrupt are the children in Khayelitsha, Langa, and in Labrador and so on and so forth. So we have a problem here that is partly political and maybe partly technical, but we're not resolving any of this. So my research has mainly been in Zimbabwe and in Namibia, and to a lesser extent Mozambique, where I looked at their school systems comparatively, in other words, in relation to South Africa. And one of the things that's really fascinating when you go to Zimbabwe is where I, by the way, when I was rector at the Free State, I went to recruit students there. And, you know why? Because the only student on this continent that can guarantee you 80% average in actuarial science is from Zimbabwe. Now ask yourself this: the political system collapsed, the economy collapsed. Why are their schools doing so well? I'll tell you why their schools are doing so well. Because our major mistake was not 1948, when the Nats came to power. It was 1954, when they took away the authority of schools from the missions, it's the churches, because they believed that the churches were giving Black people a liberal education. The Mandelas, the elites, the Mandelas, the Sisulis, the Tambos, and so on. They all went to church schools, And so they shut down those schools and put it under control of the white government. Huge mistake, because from there it went south. Okay. Zimbabwe, for some reason, and it was Rhodesia, never took the authority for schools away from the Anglican churches and the Catholic churches to this day. And by the way, this is going to really anger those of you who believe that decolonization is a real issue. Which, by the way, it's not. It's a load of crap. It's a distraction. Okay, it's a slogan. That doesn't mean there aren't issues that must be decolonized, but it's the wrong word for a country with our particular curricular problems. To this day, Zimbabwe's external examination is still run by the Cambridge Examination Syndicate. That is the O levels of the A levels. Yeah, you'd find decolonized the exam system. Yeah, I suppose we could. But does it matter that the kids are also learning? Does it matter? I went to recruit at the top girls' school, as I said, by last year as Vice Chancellor. It's called the Rundle Girls in Harare. And I was early, so I went to the chapel and, prayed for my sins, which are many. And so I'm sitting in the chapel waiting for the girls to come out for the talk. And I saw a hymn book and I picked up the hymn book. Guess what the first hymn is in the hymn book? God save our gracious King, not even Queen, King, right? So it shows you how old the book is. Yeah. And I remember saying to myself, this is South Africa, they burn the chapel and the books, forgetting that this is the school that gives South Africa accountants and behavioral science. Unfortunately, we blocked them in medicine because of some arcane rules from the Department of Health. But still, I believe, and then I just want to say one more thing about schools. I have had the privilege of studying both in South Africa and at the best universities in the world. I've also had the privilege of teaching kids at the worst school in South Africa, which is Oscar Mbeta High School in Mayanga, and probably the wealthiest school in the world, which is called Castanea Girls in Palo Alto, California. It's where Steve Jobs' daughter went. And I've looked very carefully at the kids at Oscar Mbeta, and I've looked very carefully at the kids at Castine. And I can tell you now, okay, there's absolutely no difference between the kids in the two schools. Absolutely no difference. I teach them with the same facility, with the same outcomes, with the same. The only difference is the structure of opportunity. That is, if you don't give young people the opportunity, So if, for example, as we know in South African schools, in township schools, kids get a third of the instructional time of the kids in the former white schools. How the hell do you get out good outcomes? If the teachers aren't there every time, if somebody interrupts all the time, if there's choir practices every Friday, if the principal runs a spaza shop, I'm giving you actual examples that I can back up, right? Then of course the children are going to be shortchanged. There is nothing wrong with, so when I go into a school and the teachers come to me and say, oh, today's children, then I tell you I'm a man of peace, I'm a pacifist, I just want to reach for my gun. The kids are not your problem, okay? It's giving them the opportunity, showing up when you must, okay? Teaching them well, motivating them to. That's what you see at the schools around here, especially primary schools. You want to sort of see a motivational set. Go to an Afrikaans primary school. I have never seen this before. The teachers jump out of the class. Oh, will you do it? What the hell? Have you ever seen that in the schools I went to? No. What do they do? I do smack you or beat you up, So there's something wrong here, and this is a leadership problem. This is not a funding problem. Trevor Manuel was right when he was Minister of Finance. Education doesn't need more money. Education needs to spend the money that it has in a way that is more efficient. So the economists of education like to talk about efficiency, right? The system is wholly efficient when 500,000 kids drop out between grades 2 and grades 12. That's the research here from Stellenbosch University, okay? How do you do that? That's a waste of human potential, okay? Et cetera, et cetera. So coming back finally then to the funding issue. There's something else. So one of the things that we're supposed to do, as professors, we're supposed to think, but we don't do a lot of that, But we're going to think a little bit about what are the changes that are happening in let's take it first of all in higher education, that is not obvious. So the obvious changes is road statue came down. But that's easy, you can see it, right? But there's other things that also happened, okay? And one of the big things that happened was the welfareization of the South African university. So what is very interesting is when you and I went to university, some of you are too young to know what I'm talking. You went, the professor showed up, he or she gave you very few sheets, they taught you, and they would graduate you. That was it. Now the student comes and says, no, I want the same treatment that I had as a welfare recipient of one of the 3 or 4 major welfare grants, and I want to treat you the way I treat the municipal manager. That is, if you don't give it to me, I burn down the place. That's really what happened. So that shift in the culture of campuses has changed, and nobody's noticed this, okay? And that is why I called out the move from a progressive start to the student movement, which was really fantastic, which was non-racial, which was single issue focused, which was incredibly, I thought, well strategized, and then it became a movement dominated by fascists, people who believed that you can burn down things, break down things, despise other human beings, be racist and misogynist at the same time. And I said, but this is not what the struggle is about, okay? And nobody noticed that with that shift came a thuggery that we haven't yet seen in 100 years of South African higher education, etc. But underlying that is this notion, you must pay me my tuition, Klaskeld. You must pay me for accommodation. You must set me up. You must pay if I don't have accommodation for after hours transport. So if it gets dark at night, I expect the university to transport me up. And by the way, you must feed me. Now this is new. So when I came to the University of the Free State, my wife and I realized that actually genuinely, you might recall, there's a whole lot of students that just couldn't feed themselves. So, you know, being human beings, we said that every talk I ever give, all that money would go towards the No Student Hungry campaign. Now, to make it this, and we did that, and we fed students who didn't have what's there. But the student also needs textbooks, okay? They would say, now, of course, it got bizarre after a while because one of the demands that would show up at many universities was for edible condoms. Now, that's where I drew the line, you know, because I could understand. It was the edible got to me, you know, but it was, you are responsible for the full spectrum of my needs, not just as an EODA, you know, my Klaskeld, my tuition, etc. And people didn't notice that shift. That was a very important shift. Why did it happen? Because the students now coming into university are students mainly, especially in the historically black universities, less so Stellenbosch University at the moment. That will change. But it's students who came out of homes where the state provided a child grant, where the state provided. So it wasn't unfamiliar to you that the state's role is now also to make sure that you get through university. You know, if you wanted to be critical, you call it the value state. If you wanted to be more progressive, then you'd understand this is what the government does. But I'll never forget Trevor Manuel once asking in Parliament when we went into this massive welfare system, he said, is this the kind of country we want to build? Let's just ask ourselves, we'll do it. But is this the kind of country we want to build where my role is to receive? So if you take, for example, I wanted to become a chemist, a biochemist, right? In those days, if you were black, you couldn't become a biochemist because there was no bursary available for that. So you became, as many black people then did, students, you became a teacher, a librarian, a nurse or something. So I decided, let me just do teaching to at least get a BSc degree, etc., etc. And of course I did that, to my surprise, when I went to teach, to pay back the bursary, I discovered I absolutely love teaching. This day I still think it's the best profession. My point simply is I had to pay back the bursary so that that money was available again for somebody else's child to be able to continue. That system doesn't work anymore. NSFAS, the state scheme, is probably the most inefficient system that you've seen ever. So that's why students always rebelling, okay, etc. So, but this notion of you must give me, I mustn't pay anything, I don't want to work, don't tell me where to go, is a very dangerous thing, okay, in a poor country. I would prefer being able to say, and by the way, I would even make this much more progressive and sort of say, in response for this work, we will place you in schools in which you can make a difference, the way they do with doctors, okay? So instead of all the white kids going back to Bloemhof and all the black kids going back to Oscar Petter, how about we spread the skills, the talent, the diversity across to where the need is, rather than simply repeating historical patterns. But that is another political game. So that is a major shift that's taken place. And I just want to mention one other shift, which will be the subject of a seminar that I have organized for Wednesday in Johannesburg. Because apart from the welfareization of the campuses, what's also happened is the growing trend towards what I call incivility. That is, it's not enough for me to protest. I must also break down. So when somebody throws a petrol bomb, I'm not making this up, through the office window of Max Price at UCT, that scared the hell out of me. Not the petrol bomb. I've seen petrol bombs in my lifetime. What scared me is that how can a university be a place in which you're fearful? How can a university be a place in which somebody gets up in a major seminar by Ngugi wa Thiong'o and says, don't speak until all the whites have left the room? In what fucking country do we allow that to happen? Not in this country. How is it possible that I take down Billy Besto, who's a black guy, and I take out down his artwork because I don't understand the artwork. Okay, with the artwork of Molly Blackburn, who was a progressive white backslash person, and I just drag down this and say, well, what is me is not so much the protest. The protest is part of democracy. It's something that is necessary to keep us, especially in universities. It's this indiscrimination. It's this understanding that, you know, in political science, no white kid does political science anymore at UCT. Somebody told me the other day. You know why? Because the moment you have an independent view, this happens. Okay, shut up. No. What we must make sure we sustain are university campuses in which anyone can have an opinion, whether it's land reform, gender discrimination. I mean, you take your topic without the fear. I mean, otherwise, we just like the churches and the mosques and the synagogues. We're just like everybody else. You know that there's a doctrinal truth, and everybody else that challenges that we'll deal with. Okay, I really think that is the biggest shift that's happened in South Africa. By the way, it's not unlike some of the shifts happening in some of the Western countries. Certainly, the other country I know best, which is the United States. They also, places like Middlebury College, Berkeley in California, you know, you shut out right-wing speakers. Now, by the way, I don't like them, but the moment you shut them down, you're creating problems in terms of an open campus in which anybody's views, even the most obscene person, you know, can state a point of view without being threatened, and so on and so forth. So what I've tried to give you is just a sense, first of all, of what the issues are as I see it in higher education, why it's not being resolved in part because of the pipeline problem from schools, and that therefore to fix education, you can't just fix one element of it. You have to fix the whole chain from preschool to we haven't even talked about TVETs, the technical and vocational colleges, as a way of sustaining not just the economy, but also sustaining the society in which I still remain very hopeful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Jansen. I'm going to open the floor for questions. So if there's any questions that you'd like to send across, you can start sending these through. But maybe just for us gathered around the room and those listening as well, in terms of business and the role that business can play in the education dialogue in our nation, what is it that we as business can really contribute strategically?
Okay, so I have a different view from a lot of people on, because I sit on the board of at least one JSC listed company. I often speak to corporates, and it's sort of, which is new to me because I'm a schools person, so as they say in Afrikaans, on a basement here. I don't know much about the business world and investments and so on and so forth, but it seems to me that what the business community must do is something different from what everybody else does. In other words, what everybody else does is to say things like, there is a deficiency or a shortage or this, so let's get more textbooks into schools, let's get more training for teachers, let's get more. This is how I want you guys to think. I want you to think and sort of say, how can we add value? In other words, not make up for, but add value to. That's a completely different scale, because you're now beginning to sort of say, how do you take the country forward? Let me give you an example. I'm seriously thinking, and maybe I'll stop by you, Shingiwe, and ask for seed funding. But I'm seriously thinking, in part because I live in two parts of the world, in Silicon Valley and here in Stellenbosch, I'm seriously thinking of opening up a school for all our children, in which the sole purpose is to prepare them for the next level of technological innovation in the world. A school in which every kid can code, a school in which every child would have had experience with artificial intelligence, and in particular with robotics. A school in which, in other words, I think the business world must stretch the system. But if you're simply going to make up the math literacy, and the life orientation and all this crap, I think you must leave that to the state in whatever, ways they do or do not do that. But I think we need to stretch our children, because there's no reason why a child in a township or a child here in town cannot have the same access. My heart breaks, I met recently with, I think I might have told some of you, I met recently with South Africans, many from Stellenbosch, by the way, whom you've never heard of. You've only heard of Elon Musk from Pretoria Boys, right? But you actually haven't heard about all of them. They're millionaires, some of them billionaires in dollars, okay? And they're living in the Silicon Valley, San Jose, San Francisco, Palo Alto, Mountain View, where Google is, etc. Right? These guys are retiring at 35, which I think is really boring, but that's another story. Okay. And I said to them, why did you make it here but not in South Africa? And they said three things. One is, here people often do all-nighters. You know what that means? You work through the night, but here it means you slept with someone. It's just a completely different understanding. Okay, sorry guys. But we're basically lazy people. We're basically, I've never seen more leegate than in South Africa. You know, you watch what happens when you have a long weekend, an unofficial long weekend. When there's a holiday on a Thursday, you take off the Friday. You had Stellenbosch. It was like ghost town the other day. I was the only one at work. Okay. And so I don't think we know what it means to work hard, and I really mean work hard. Okay. The second thing they said is, yeah, people expect you to fail, so they write books like Fail Forward. Okay. Whereas this country is risk averse. Did any of you remember getting hidings for getting an answer wrong in school? I remember that, especially in woodwork, which was the worst subject. Because you get something wrong because, you know, the instrument of oppression was available. You know? A plank. So they beat you every time you drew the right. I was hopeless at woodwork, you know. So there, they said, yeah, people expect you to fail. In other words, you know, so everybody talks about the satellites that Elon sends into space. They don't care about the 20 that failed, in which Russian payloads exploded in space. In other words, to get there, you have to screw up. But our system is risk averse. We still teach kids to draw within the lines for no reason at all. Why draw within the lines? My kid got his first hiding. He was born in New York. He got his first hiding in Durban because at Westfield Junior Primary, he refused to draw within the line. He thought, you know, drawing out of the line was more exciting. So this is a risk-averse culture, and that is why we cannot produce these kinds of companies. But thirdly is, not only do they expect you to fail, they expect you to do well. Oh my Lord. A 30% and 40% pass rate is a messaging system. The messaging system is, we expect you to underperform. We'll lower the bar for you. How many of you here, when you went to university, had at least one professor who said to you, welcome to chemistry 390, by the end of the first semester, half of you will be gone. Yeah. Just put up your hand if something like that happened to you. How the hell can they tell you you failed before you even started? That's a cultural problem, you know, and that is why I always tell kids in technology, if you want to do well, you've got to leave this country. Come back, but you've got to leave it. Because there's nothing different than Silicon Valley. And by the way, I was there as a student in the late 1980s, early 90s, okay? The place was pristine white. Do you know what you see now? It's brown. All those software engineers are from India, okay? You know, there's something, I want to go to India, there's something in Indian culture that produces these incredibly smart young people who understood that culture and were able to benefit from it. The guy that did a Microsoft thing the other day, you see it, this device that can now make a booking for you at a restaurant. I mean, I found that fascinating. It's an Indian guy, you know, I mean, et cetera, et cetera. So I think as Africans and as South Africans, you know, and by the way, when I say African, I mean the continent, but as South Africans in particular, we need to figure out what business investments get us there, as opposed to simply saying the actual course formulations. Don't do that kind of crap. Think big and take our children forward.
Awesome. I'm just gonna, before I open up maybe to the floor here, we've got a question from Mickey Wilkins of Domino Business, and he's asking, how important is the role of a mentor in the life of a student from a disadvantaged background?
So all of you have heard the term social capital, which, as you know, in its simplest definition, has to do with social networks, right? So I've always been amazed, having grown up here at the Cape Flats, you know, and I've always been amazed at how a kid who is fairly hopeless at Saks or Bishops, right? His father can simply call up a friend, you know, at a tech company or and say, Bob, you know, my son here, you know, my wife persuades me he is my own. You know, can you fit him in there somewhere in the company? You know, and so on. And of course, this kid who's a bloody hopeless, you know, goes in, and before you know it, he has the privilege of getting the job, etc., etc. I believe that one of the major reasons young people succumb, you know, in making that transition from, let's say, a first degree into the workplace, they don't have mentors. They don't have networks. So one of the things Lorenzo Davids and I are going to set up in the Cape is a massive network of really prominent South Africans. Stafford Massey, who ran the Google South Africa office, for example, who started his career, by the way, stealing ideas out of cars. They no longer do it now, they just steal the cars. You know, but I remember those days when we stole ideas out of cars. So, you know, Steph, myself, Lorenzo, this very exciting guy, Seth Mancini at Investec. We're going to actually set up this company that enables a kid that says, I've got my law degree, but I need an internship. Poor white kids, okay? You're not going to believe this. I mean, Tanya Carlos, she comes from Boxburg, which means you're seriously disadvantaged, you know. Tanya Carlos doesn't have a father. She doesn't. She comes from a poor white background, yeah, but she was my student at the University of Free State. I immediately picked up the phone, and Tanya got to intern in the Constitutional Court. I mean, that's massive. You know, now she can go anywhere in the world. So we need to create those networks for women, for young girls. We need to create those networks for black young people, because it's not obvious to you, especially if your parents didn't go to university, your mother works at game in the back office, you know. This is, yeah, I like that question. It's extremely important. And by the way, I hope all of you serve as a mentor to at least one person. It really makes a difference. Not just for knowledge, but for emotional and other kinds of support.
Okay, awesome. I'm going to open the floor. Let's maybe start with Kerry.
So I've got a question. I had an interesting discussion this weekend with somebody who works in a lot of your Lavender Hill schools and those sorts of things. They're part of the Principals Academy. And she was saying that the one thing, she was challenging the idea of opportunity being the thing that a child needs. She was saying that so often the social background that the child comes from plays such a huge role. So an example was a little boy was there for a couple of months and he had this just dead look on his face and he did nothing, didn't engage. And it's because he'd seen his mom getting stabbed by his sister. And there was lots of trauma that was associated to it. And then a couple of weeks later, he was shining and glowing and engaged and doing all sorts of things. And they said, no, his mom's just got a job. And obviously the stress that had been on the family or on the household had relieved a little bit. And now that his mom had a job, he was a different little boy. And so what role does your socioeconomic landscape actually play into your education in parallel, I suppose, with opportunity? Because you need the opportunity, but with opportunity, what does the socioeconomic side do to your education?
So, you know, it's huge. You know, I know because of where I grew up in Retreat and you know, worked with youth in Lavender and all of that, Stellenbosch and so on. So absolutely, it plays a huge role. But that cannot be the beginning and the end of it all. So it would be nice if every home had two parents. It would be nice if the father showed up and wasn't drunk and circulating through Polesmore prison. It would be nice if none of the kids in the house used stick. Those would all be really nice things. The truth is, our reality is not that, right? And everybody had a job. So part of what we have to do, or what we should be doing, is to sort of say, what are the points of entry into those dilemmas that sparks the attention of a kid? Okay? Wasinukolo Vilichana, whom I have supported from Nayanga, from Ascolpeta, who got 100% in history. And what got his attention was a Zimbabwean teacher. You know, that's the only way you get 100% in history. And then I got him money to study for free for 4 years. And he called me in November to say, you know, I am now a Nelson Mandela Rhodes Scholar. You know, I mean, I cried for weeks, you know. My point is, for every kid, there is something. For other kids, it's sports. Maybe just the motivation that comes from being noticed, recognized, okay, as an athlete, is that netball, rugby, soccer. I mean, should take your point. So we've got to find ways of connecting to kids that spark, as you said, with this child, it was a job for the mother, that sparked their attention. But your starting point has to be the children are not your problem. Okay? Any child wants to do well. I've not yet met, having taught thousands and thousands of students, and so I'm not yet met one that says, I'd really like to screw up my life. I think kids come. You just got to know how to switch those on. And as I said, different strokes for different folks. Every kid is different, and some take longer. You know, I mean, people often, my students often say to me, if you say, "Oh, my prof, you was altered." No. They don't realize when I was at primary school, my math marks were negative integers. It took a long time, okay, for something to click for me, and it was simply a Latin teacher who also taught me how to run the 800 meters. I know you so say this is impossible, but trust me, I beat Cookson from Cressy in the 800 meters, which was a big deal. My point simply is that find out what connects and work it. But I tell you, the most important thing is a teacher that shows up motivated. A teacher that shows up and demonstrates to this. Do you know why most black kids don't become teachers? Do you know who the people are here at Stellenbosch, at Kopsies, at Tekkies who study teaching? It's white Afrikaans girls. No black kid wants that. You know what? They had 12 years of apprenticeship, and they've looked at us and they say, "Dear folk, you know, this is not what I want to do." Okay. No, I mean, it's seriously. You had 12 years of interrupted education, of poorly trained teachers, of being beaten for nothing. You don't become a teacher. You went to UCLA Law. You see, CSI. My son wanted to do forensics. I said, "Why forensics?" You said, "Dad, did you see those babes on CNI?" I said, the people who work in forensics look more like Mickey Pistorius than these sort of really thin blondes who solve the problems in 30 minutes. It doesn't happen between ad breaks, etc. But there's an aspirational side to law, to medicine, to what's that drive the kids there as opposed to education. And so trying to, giving young people those opportunities. So one of the schools we're working with right now, as well as Temba in Worcester, okay, we've banned life orientation. We said that's what should happen at home and in your church. We've banned math literacy in those schools, okay, in that school that we've taken over. And every kid gets to go to Stellenbosch University, UWC, from grade 8 onwards, sit in a class, watch how people teach, figure out how to work the library, so that the connection is made between who I am and what I can be. That's what it's about. It's not about figuring out the Dewey Decimal System. It's about figuring out that this place is also for me, but you've got to connect.
I have a question. You've mentioned a couple of times that government doesn't really, or the politicians don't care sufficiently for education, and you also say that business is, in the world we work in, there's a lot of corporate social investment going into education, and a lot of it trying to make up for that deficiency that you spoke of. And you're saying actually we must go and push the limits with that capital that we have. But how do you get to change the politician's mindset? Can business somehow form a pressure group to pressure on government, or is it the academia, or how do you change that perspective within the politicians' minds and within that circles to get them to really focus on the structures and some of education?
Okay, maybe it's because I turned 61, that I sort of say, I've got this limited energy left and this limited time. Where do I want to spend it? And the last place I want to spend it is with politicians who are bloody arrogant and bloody cold-hearted when it comes to the poor, okay? Look at the performance in Parliament. Do you really think that's about people? It's about egos. It's about their positioning and so on. Not a day goes by where there isn't another scandal. Just look at the scandal around this petrol stuff with SA Express. They used to steal and run away. Now you steal and you stay there. Used to, a friend of mine in Pretoria, Nick Rovia, says the innocent thing that was on the Skype and the deer like a scamper. He says, no longer. My dog feels more guilty. When he chased the cat up the tree than a politician. He's stealing prasa. Take your pick. I don't want to spend my time convincing people who drive in blue light brigades and give themselves the sense of importance. I just don't know whether that's useful. So what I think business probably should have a pressure group, but I would prefer to sort of say, what can we change in the meantime? Okay. And what I would like to do politically is vote out these people, as opposed to trying to persuade them to be decent. But that's me.
All right, we have reached the end of our timing for the webinar. We just want to say thank you so much, Prof. Jansen, for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and you've really given us food for thought to not just follow the status quo, but as business to really push into new frontiers. So, and everyone who's logged in, thank you so much for joining. We'll catch up with you guys in July when we have our talk on land reform. We will have both government as well as an economist joining us in for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.